Do not let people know that I'm doing my research on Wikipedia.
I'm gonna let them know.
Hey folks, welcome to This Podcast is Queer. What are we talking about today, Ethan?
So today we're talking about what is queer, like what's the meaning of queer, the history of the word queer, what qualifies as queer, and why we identify with the word queer and why others might not.
So, just basically the history of queer.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with that, Ethan? 'Cause I'm a little bit lost, not gonna lie.
So what queer means, currently, I think it can be interpreted in different ways. For me, queer means like anything that's not straight cis-het. So, like, your gender could be queer or your sexuality could be queer. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. It can, yeah.
Yeah, I'd kind of say it's an umbrella term that just kind of covers a lot of different identities because I feel like a lot of people are more likely to identify with queer if they're not binary or like their sexuality isn't just like straight or gay, somewhere in between.
Yeah. I identify with the word queer personally because my sexuality, fuck knows, in all honesty. Like, my sexuality is literally like, I'm straight, but men are kind of attractive, I guess, and if there's no other choice, I'm okay with men, but mostly I'm straight.
I think some people would like say that's heteroflexible. I've heard that term.
Yeah.
But whatever word suits you, that's like, I mean, I identify as bi, and I would probably date like anybody on whatever gender spectrum. Yeah. Like, I would date anybody regardless of gender if I liked them, if I felt a connection to them, and so some people would say that's pan, but personally I just, like, prefer the word bisexual and it fits me more, I guess.
So as well, I identify with queer because I feel like even if I identify as a binary trans guy, I do, like, expression-wise prefer to be androgynous, or, like, how I act, I prefer to be a bit more androgynous, even though I identify binary, so I feel like that helps with that, like, summarise that up.
I like calling myself queer. It makes me... I just like calling myself queer. It just seems it's a word that fits me, not just because... Again, like, I'm not exactly the most masculine trans guy out there. Like, I like painting my nails, I like being femme sometimes.
I also like queer as well because, like, it comes from the word weird, which we'll get onto in a bit, and originally it was sort of meant to mean weird and that sort of thing, thinking of more on that, but like my mum when I was growing up always called me queer meaning that, and yeah, I identify as fucking weird. I like being weird.
I think there's something like that feels good when you come to accept your sexuality if you identify as queer as just like you see that a lot of like history behind it. You know that the word is quite powerful, and to say that you're queer is quite empowering, I'd say. I think that's why I identify with the word queer as well. It is empowering for me, and like it just seems to fit my sexuality a lot more than a lot of other words do. So self-identifying as queer is just, it fits me.
Yeah. But going back to the history of the meaning of the word queer, what the word queer originally meant was, like I said, weird and...
Yeah, the word queer originally was... Queer is an umbrella term for sexual, gender, blah, blah, blah. We've already covered that.
But what did it mean originally before that?
It, like, originally came from the word strange or peculiar. And 16th century, queer originally meant strange, odd, peculiar, or eccentric. It might refer to something suspicious or not quite right, or to a person with a mild derangement who exhibits socially inappropriate behaviour. And obviously, because being gay would be socially inappropriate back then, I'm assuming that it's grown from that, which Ethan's going to tell you about now.
Queer as a slur was first recorded, being used by John Douglas IX, Marquis of Queensberry. Long name. He was writing about Oscar Wilde, of course, Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde.
and this was in 1894. And basically, Douglas had discovered that his son was in a relationship with Oscar Wilde and was concerned of a potential gay sex scandal. And immediately set out to prosecute Wilde in any possible way and basically described him as queer. He also used snob queers as the term.
Snob queers?
Yeah, snob queers as a descriptor for gay men, establishing queer's reputation as a gay slur. And that was quickly picked up by American newspapers using it as a derogatory term. And then back in Britain, in the Oxford Dictionary, they decided to differentiate using the word queer as an adjective and a verb. For some reason, deciding to highlight, even though it's quite obvious that saying someone is a queer sounds more offensive than using it as an adjective. Like, we don't identify as a queer, we identify as being queer. So it's a part of who we are, not the whole of who we are.
I mean, if somebody was to personally call me queer, first of all, it would have to be somebody I knew. If it was a stranger, I don't think I'd feel comfortable with somebody going, oh, you're queer. But if somebody was to call me queer as opposed to, oh, you're a queer, something about the you're a queer is like very much
insult.
Yeah, it's an insult. It's like that's a lot of like when it comes to reclaiming.
We reclaim stuff as descriptive words rather than as like actual like full-on noun, I guess. Like, it's when people say, oh, someone's a transgender, it's like, no, someone is transgender. It's a part of them, but it's not the whole of them. It's also grammatically incorrect, so get your shit together, Karen.
Yeah, it's like I was reading Unique's bio page of Glee on Glee Wiki, and I remember specifically reading the words other transgenders. She said other transgenders did this. No, I've never heard a transgender person call themselves a transgender.
Obviously, from it being a slur, it has been reclaimed, and that happened in the last century.
It was like more in the midst of the AIDS, like when AIDS was becoming quite prevalent. Obviously, a lot of activism was around then because people watching their friends die, and you know the US government was doing nothing about it. Because they were more concerned about drugs.
Which led to the rise of queer punks and queercore.
Like, you read about the protests when people were, like, in the midst of the reclaiming of the word, and I was reading about protests where a group of queer activists went into a straight bar, and started playing Spin the Bottle. And just generally living their lives and doing things that straight people did in their day-to-day lives, and they were just living out loud, and that's quite powerful, I think.
Also, like, I don't think I've ever been to a pride or any sort of queer protest where you haven't heard "we're here, we're queer, we will not live in fear," which comes from the protests during the AIDS epidemic. Again,
going back to like the origin of the word, like queer as folk is seen as like such a big piece of like LGBT media, and it's really integral in a lot of people's lives. I personally have never seen it. Have you seen it?
No, but I've watched L Word many times.
I've never watched the L Word either. But I was like, popular phrase was "there's no so queer as folk," and it was a proper Yorkshire phrase. Yeah, Yorkshire.
Also, because we haven't mentioned this, not everyone identifies with the word queer. Not everyone likes it, and that's completely like acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that, and you shouldn't impose labels upon other people. And reasons, people have many different reasons for not liking or identifying with that word. Some of the times it's because of the history of it used being a slur and like it personally being used against them, which I don't think it was ever used vindictively against me growing up.
I've heard it used vindictively against other people, but not against myself. I think it is becoming less vindictive. I think a lot of our generation and a lot of like LGBT people, some have had queer used as an insult towards them, but I feel like it's more of a older generation's sort of insult, which I think is why a lot of people who are older don't like identifying as the word queer, because they've personally had it used as an insult to them, maybe.
Yeah.
I can't really say for sure because obviously that's not my experience to have, but like when I had a lot of insults thrown at me, but never queer.
Yeah, same. Also, I'd like to talk about like the pros and cons of the word queer.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, reasons why I really like the word queer is because it's very inclusive. It includes like let's say we're just using it to refer to sexuality, people say, well, gay is inclusive, but it's actually more of a masculine term. And it also includes, like, queer includes non-binary people, and, like, no matter how they identify, that's not straight, I guess, because it encompasses, like, no one's sexuality is exactly the same, and I like that about queer, because it just...
Yeah, as somebody who identifies as bi, I become less likely to call myself gay now, but I would more likely to call myself queer just because saying I'm gay, I feel like I erase as part of my identity as a bisexual person, and a lot of bisexual people are already erased, and, you know...
This is going to be, like, a shit thing to say, probably, and I'm going to apologise. As a straight person, this is probably me just being shit. But I really don't like it when I'm in trans spaces, especially when everyone's referring to everyone as gay, and it's like, well... being trans and being gay are two different things. Like, I'm okay with being referred to as gay. I am very feminine, but it's also like my identity is not that.
Other people, if they were to call me queer, I feel not queer. If other people were to call me gay, it depends how comfortable I am with them, and like what context it is. But I prefer to be called queer over gay. Just like it is more inclusive.
We're going to discuss like queer art, queer culture.
I think it is important to note before we do move on that you should not call another person queer unless you're okay with that. You know they're okay with the word.
Oh yeah.
And like maybe don't even. Some people don't even like hearing the word, which is fine. Like,
sorry about this podcast to those people.
Oh yeah. We didn't really think that through, did we? Sorry, fuck.
I've just got some Googling in front of me about queer art.
We're so well researched, aren't we?
Oh yeah, I did a lot of reading before this, but my brain doesn't.
I watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and there is a lot about the history of queer dance and.
Well, the first headline that's come up on my phone as I researched queer art is Queer British Art, 1861 to 1967.
What I like about queer art. I was looking at these pictures done by artists, and it was just photography and like a lot about like queer bodies and reclaiming. That's the thing. A lot of queer art is about reclaiming aspects of yourself, just like the word itself is being reclaimed. It's about reclaiming aspects of yourself and like owning those things. And a lot of the photography that I was looking at was just trans bodies and showing that like there are lots of different types of trans bodies. There are a lot of different types of queer people just in general, and just owning that and accepting that a bit more. It's difficult for people who experience dysphoria who are trans. But that's why it's so important.
Also, I think
just representation.
Yeah. Also, I think like as a queer person, you get a very different worldview of like everything than a cis-het person would.
Yeah.
And as a queer person, like, so I'm not going to say all because I know there are some shitty queer people in the world, just to establish that. But I don't know, there's some sort of empathy that you get with people that I don't think you can get from being cis-het. Like, there's this sort of joint pain and at the same time joint happiness and stuff that relatable, and through art, like, it shines.
It unites queer people, or just LGBT people. There's something about we all have some sort of shared experience in a way of the world that cis-het people don't, and I think that's what drives us together as a community. It's like one of the reasons that I probably wouldn't choose not to be queer if I had a choice. If I had a choice, I probably would choose to be queer for certain reasons, but one of them is just because it's brought me so close to people who I would have never met, and it's given me opportunities that I would never have had. And like just self-identifying as queer is something that unifies me with a lot of other people, and queer artists and people who make queer art can really show that through their art.
Also, like, we've both been very involved in different like queer spaces anyway, and like
all of my notes are not very descriptive. Thanks.
By past Adam, he means Adam about 10 minutes before we started to record this.
They're like, you need to write it down. It's like, no, I can wing it. It's fine. Don't worry. I know what I want to talk about. I've got my phone.
I can talk about what I want.
I did a lot of research. Surprisingly, none of it is in my brain right now because brain fog.
Also, queer art, it helps with visibility within the world. Like, the art world is a big world, there's all different art forms, and that shows, like, hey, we exist. Queer people, hi.
It's like the thing is, throughout history, queer people have been shoved to the side and have been told to repress themselves and their identities. And, like, being openly queer and creating queer art is just, like, not only is it really great for the person who's doing it, and, like, I've made queer art for myself, and it is quite nice to just kind of put those feelings on the page, like, mostly relating to dysphoria, but it was something I was thinking about the other day. Having that be out there in the world and be visible, not only it shows other people you're not alone, other queer people can see it and think, okay, yeah, there are other people who identify the same as me.
So anyway,
Short pilot.
this was our pilot, in quotation marks.
Yeah, this is a little bit jumbled. We're still finding our footing. I think it's important to note.
And we have filmed 2 back-to-back, and we might film another one, considering we've got time.
You know, we're still finding our footing, so this might not be the format that we carry on with, but I'm liking it where we're just bouncing off each other and talking to each other.
Yeah, also, might not be the format we carry on with, and we're going to try hopefully get 2 out a month. Might be more, might be less. We're just going to see what happens. I reckon we can probably do 2 a month, because I see you probably 3 or 4 times a month. Yeah, and also we could probably do more if it, like, something comes up and we're like, yes, we need to talk about this now. And
yeah, if an event happens, like gay marriage suddenly becomes legalised everywhere in the world, wouldn't that be fantastic?
Oh yeah, considering it's still a death penalty in some places.
I don't think we're going to see it in this lifetime. That makes me sad.
Also, LGBT History Month is coming up, and
we'll do a special episode.
That is next month. So we will do an episode next month specially for that, and we'll talk about probably British queer history mostly, but we will try to.
What do we have coming up in the next, say, 2 or 3 episodes? So he's got it all written down.
In the next episode, we figured we'd do one on queer LGBTQ terminology.
Oh, we'll have a lot to cover in that one.
Yeah, so we'll probably just bounce words back and forth, be like, hey, what does this mean? And
yeah, and we should talk about the fact that some people think our acronym's too long.
And we'll also talk about the fact that cis is not a bad word.
Oh, boy, howdy.
So, have fun, looking forward to that, and we will see you later, folks. Bye. Like
my sexuality. Side note, Lily just texted me that I left my cinnamon bun at hers, and I'm just really sad about that, because I was really excited about that cinnamon bun. Rest in peace, my cinnamon bun.